What happens when America's sweetheart meets Hollywood's most outspoken talk show host, and the conversation takes a turn that nobody saw coming? Today, we're diving into one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history, when Julia Roberts appeared on The View, and things went completely off the rails. By the end of this story, you'll understand why Julia stormed off set, and why Whoopi Goldberg became the villain in what should have been a routine promotional interview. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story has layers that will shock you. It started as any other Tuesday morning at The View. The iconic round table was set, the cameras were rolling, and the audience was buzzing with excitement. Julia Roberts had come on the show to promote her latest film, a heartwarming drama about family reunification. What the producers didn't expect was for the conversation to spiral into a personal attack that would leave one of Hollywood's biggest stars walking off in disgust. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the incomparable Julia Roberts, Whoopi announced with her signature smile. But there was something different in her tone today, something sharper. Julia walked out in a stunning cream-colored blazer, her famous smile lighting up the studio as she waved to the enthusiastic audience. She took her seat next to Whoopi, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. "Julia, welcome back to The View," Whoopi said, her voice carrying an edge that the other hosts seemed to pick up on immediately. "It's always such a pleasure to have you here, especially when you have something important to promote." "Thank you so much for having me, Whoopi," Julia replied warmly. "I'm so excited to talk about this film. It really means everything to me." The first few minutes proceeded normally. Julia discussed her character, the filming process, and her co-stars with genuine enthusiasm, but Whoopi kept steering the conversation in unexpected directions, asking pointed questions about Julia's past film choices and making subtle digs disguised as jokes. "You know, Julia," Whoopi said, leaning back in her chair with a smirk, "I've been watching your career for decades now, and I have to ask, do you ever get tired of playing the same character over and over again?" The studio fell silent. The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. This wasn't the playful banter that The View was known for. Julia's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her composure. "I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?" "Oh, come on," Whoopi laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. The quirky, lovable woman who gets the guy in the end. "I mean, how many times can you play that same role and call it acting?" You could hear a pin drop in the studio. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Joy Behar looked like she wanted to intervene, but Whoopi's commanding presence kept everyone frozen. "I think every character I've played has been unique and meaningful to me," Julia said carefully, her media training kicking in. "Each story has its own heart and its own truth." "Its own truth," Whoopi repeated mockingly. "That's interesting because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been coasting on that smile for 30 years. When was the last time you actually challenged yourself as an actress?" The other co-hosts were visibly squirming now. This was supposed to be a light promotional interview, not a character assassination. But Whoopi was just getting started. "I don't think that's fair," Julia said, her voice gaining strength. "I've taken on dramatic roles. I've worked with incredible directors, and I've tried to choose projects that matter to me personally." "Oh, please," Whoopi scoffed. "You've made a career out of being America's sweetheart. Do you ever wonder what would happen if people saw the real you instead of this carefully crafted image?" Julia's face was flushing now, but she tried to keep things professional. "I think audiences connect with authenticity, and I try to bring that to every role. Authenticity." Whoopi laughed again. "That's rich coming from someone who's built an empire on playing pretend. Tell me, Julia, when you look in the mirror, do you see an actress or do you see a brand?" The tension in the studio was suffocating. Camera operators were getting nervous, wondering if they should keep rolling. The audience was completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something that was going very wrong very quickly. "I see someone who loves what she does and is grateful for every opportunity," Julia replied, but her voice was starting to shake with anger. "Grateful?" Whoopi nodded sarcastically. "I'm sure you are grateful. Grateful for all those massive paychecks for essentially playing yourself in every movie. Must be nice to never have to actually act." That's when Julia's famous composure finally cracked. "Excuse me, but what exactly is your problem today, Whoopi?" My problem, Whoopi said, her voice rising, is sitting across from someone who thinks she's fooled everyone into believing she's this humble, down-to-earth person, when really you're just another Hollywood fake who's been phoning it in for decades. The studio gasped. This had crossed every line of professional courtesy and basic human decency. Julia's eyes were blazing now, and you could see her hands trembling with rage. I came here to talk about my work, not to be insulted by someone who clearly has some kind of personal issue with me, Julia said, her voice deadly calm. Personal issue? Whoopi laughed bitterly. Honey, I don't know you well enough to have a personal issue. I just call it like I see it, and what I see is someone who's been living off past glory for way too long. The other hosts finally found their voices. Joy tried to jump in with a joke to lighten the mood. Whoopi shot her down with a look. Sunny host attempted to redirect the conversation back to Julia's film, but Whoopi wasn't having it. No, 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 Whoopi said, waving her hand dismissively. We're having a real conversation here for once. Julia wants to talk about authenticity and truth. So, let's talk about it. Let's talk about how someone can make millions playing the same role and still call themselves a serious actress. Julia was gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles were white. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. Oh, but you do, Whoopi said with a cruel smile. Because this is live television and walking away would just prove my point about you not being able to handle real criticism. That was the moment everything changed. Julia Roberts, one of the most beloved actresses in Hollywood, was being systematically torn down on national television by someone who was supposed to be a colleague, if not a friend. The audience could feel the shift in the room, the moment when this stopped being awkward and started being genuinely disturbing. Julia's eyes flashed with a fire that reminded everyone why she'd commanded the screen for 3 decades. Real criticism? Is that what you call this ambush? Because last I checked, Whoopi, criticism is supposed to be constructive, not a personal attack disguised as professional commentary. Oh, so now I'm attacking you, Whoopi said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I'm just asking the questions that everyone else is too polite to ask. When was the last time you took a risk? When was the last time you did something that actually surprised people? Every single project I choose is a risk, Julia shot back, her composure finally cracking completely. Do you think it's easy to put yourself out there, to be vulnerable on screen, to trust that audiences will follow you into these stories? But clearly you wouldn't understand that. The barb hit its mark. Whoopi's expression darkened considerably. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Julia said, her voice gaining momentum, that maybe someone who spent the last 20 years sitting behind this table making jokes about other people's work shouldn't be lecturing anyone about taking risks or challenging themselves artistically. The audience gasped audibly. The other hosts looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. This had officially become a full-scale war. Excuse me. Whoopi's voice was ice-cold now. Are you questioning my credentials as an actress? I'm questioning your right to sit there and tear me down when you haven't been in front of a camera in a meaningful way in years. Julia replied, her famous smile nowhere to be found. It's easy to criticize from the sidelines, isn't it? Whoopi stood up so abruptly that her chair rolled backward. Sidelines, sidelines. I've got an Oscar, an Emmy, a Grammy, and a Tony. I've been breaking barriers in this industry since before you knew what a movie camera was. And when was the last time you used any of that talent instead of just talking about it? Julia fired back, also rising from her seat. When was the last time you created something instead of just tearing other people down? The tension in the studio was electric. Security personnel were starting to move closer to the set, unsure if they needed to intervene. The director in the control room was frantically trying to decide whether to cut to commercial. You know what your problem is, Julia, Whoopi said, pointing an accusatory finger. You've been handed everything on a silver platter your entire career. You got lucky with one romantic comedy and rode that wave for 30 years. Some of us had to actually fight for every opportunity. Fight for opportunities, Julia laughed bitterly. You think I didn't fight? You think I didn't face rejection, criticism, doubt? Just because I smile doesn't mean I haven't earned everything I have. That smile, Whoopi shook her head in disgust. That manufactured focus group smile that you think makes you relatable. Do you practice it in the mirror every morning? At least I'm not bitter and jealous attacking people who are actually still working. Julia snapped. This whole thing is pathetic. Whoopi, you're pathetic. The studio erupted. The audience was stunned into silence while the other hosts finally found their voices all talking at once, trying to restore some semblance of order. But both women were beyond hearing anyone else. Jealous? Whoopi's voice reached a dangerous pitch. Jealous of what? Your cookie-cutter career? Your predictable choices? Your complete inability to disappear into a character because you're too narcissistic to let Julia Roberts take a backseat to the role? My narcissism? Julia's voice was shaking with rage. Now, this coming from someone who's turned every conversation on this show into being about Whoopi Goldberg for the past 15 years. You can't let anyone else have a moment because you can't stand not being the center of attention. Joy Behar finally managed to get a word in. Ladies, please, let's just take a breath here and remember that we're on live television. No, Whoopi said, never taking her eyes off Julia. She wants to talk about my career. Let's talk about it. At least I've never been afraid to take on controversial roles, difficult characters, stories that matter. I've never hidden behind pretty dresses and romantic comedies because I was too scared to show the world who I really am. Who I really am. Julia's voice was climbing higher. You don't know the first thing about who I am. You see what you want to see because it fits your narrative. You've decided I'm some kind of princess who's never worked for anything. And you're wrong, am I wrong? Whoopi challenged. Because from where I'm standing, you look exactly like what I said, a brand, a product. America's sweetheart, who's more concerned with maintaining her image than actually growing as an artist. You know what, Whoopi? Julia said, her voice suddenly calm in a way that was somehow more frightening than when she'd been shouting. I think I understand what this is really about. This isn't about my career, or my choices, or my authenticity. This is about you feeling threatened by someone who's managed to stay relevant without becoming bitter and mean. Whoopi's face contorted with rage. Threatened by you, please? You're a relic, Julia. A throwback to an era when all an actress had to do was be pretty and charming. The industry has moved on even if you haven't. The industry has moved on, Julia asked incredulously. Then why am I here promoting a film while you're sitting behind a table gossiping about other people's lives? Who's really the relic here? The insult landed like a physical blow. Whoopi's hands were clenched into fists at her sides, and for a moment it looked like she might actually lunge across the table. You have no idea what you're talking about, Whoopi said through gritted teeth. I've forgotten more about acting than you'll ever know. Then maybe it's time you remembered some of it instead of spending all your time being cruel to people who are actually still working. Julia shot back. Sanani host made another desperate attempt to restore order. Maybe we should talk about Julia's new film, which really does sound wonderful. No, Whoopi said firmly, we're going to finish this conversation. Julia thinks she can come on my show and insult me. She's going to hear what I really think. Your show? Julia asked with a bitter laugh. Last I checked, this was The View, not The Whoopi Show. But I guess that's always been the problem, hasn't it? You can't share the spotlight with anyone. I don't need to share anything with someone who's been coasting on fumes for a decade, Whoopi replied viciously. Coasting? Julia's voice was deadly quiet now. I'm here working promoting a film I'm passionate about, while you sit here day after day talking about other people's accomplishments because you don't have any recent ones of your own to discuss. The entire studio was holding its breath. This had gone far beyond anything anyone had ever seen on daytime television. These weren't just heated words between colleagues. This was personal destruction happening in real time. You want to talk about accomplishments. Whoopi said, her voice rising to a near scream. Let's talk about your last 5 films. Can you even remember what they were called? Because I guarantee nobody else can. That was the final straw. Julia Roberts, who had maintained her grace under pressure for decades, who had smiled through countless interviews and handled criticism with class, had finally reached her breaking point. The look in her eyes was one of pure disgust and disappointment. You know what, Whoopi? Julia said, her voice suddenly crystal clear and devastatingly calm. I came here today thinking I was going to have a conversation with a colleague, maybe even someone I respected. But what I found instead was a bitter, jealous woman who's so threatened by other people's success that she has to tear them down on national television to feel better about herself. Whoopi's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She clearly hadn't expected Julia to come back at her with such precision and venom. "How dare you?" Whoopi managed to stammer, "How dare I?" "What?" Julia asked, stepping closer to the table. "How dare I defend myself when you've spent the last 15 minutes trying to humiliate me? How dare I point out that your behavior today has been absolutely disgraceful? Because that's exactly what this is, Whoopi. Disgraceful." The other hosts were frozen in their seats watching this nuclear explosion happen right in front of them. Joy's mouth was hanging open. Sunny looked like she was about to cry. Even the camera operators seemed transfixed by the disaster unfolding before them. "You think you can come on my show and disrespect me?" Whoopi said. Her voice lacked the conviction it had earlier. Julia's counterattack had clearly shaken her. "Disrespect you?" Julia laughed, but it was a sound devoid of any humor. "I haven't done anything but respond to your unprovoked attack. You started this, Whoopi. You chose to turn what should have been a simple interview into some kind of personal vendetta. And for what? What did I ever do to you to deserve this treatment?" Whoopi opened her mouth to respond, but Julia held up her hand. "No, don't answer that because we both know the answer. I didn't do anything to you. This isn't about me at all. This is about you and whatever personal demons you're wrestling with. Maybe it's about feeling like your time has passed. Maybe it's about watching other people succeed while you sit behind this table every day. I don't know, and frankly, I don't care anymore." The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Even the audience seemed to have stopped breathing. "But I'll tell you what I'm not going to do," Julia continued, her voice gaining power with every word. "I'm not going to sit here and let you use me as your punching bag because you're having some kind of midlife crisis. I'm not going to smile and pretend this is normal behavior because it's live television. And I'm certainly not going to give you the satisfaction of seeing me break down because of your cruelty." Whoopi finally found her voice again. "You can't talk to me like that. This is my show. This was your show," Julia corrected her, "but you just destroyed any credibility you had left. Do you think people are going to watch this and think you're the hero here? Do you think anyone is going to see this behavior and respect you for it?" Julia turned to look directly into the camera, addressing the audience at home. "I want everyone watching to understand what just happened here. I came to promote a film about family, about healing, about second chances. Instead, I was subjected to a personal attack by someone who clearly has forgotten what professionalism looks like." Whoopi tried to interject. "Now, wait just a minute." "No," Julia said firmly, turning back to face her. "You've said quite enough. In fact, you've said too much. You've shown everyone exactly who you really are, and it's not pretty, Whoopi. It's small and mean and petty." Julia reached down and grabbed her purse from beside her chair. The simple action seemed to electrify the studio. Everyone realized what was about to happen. "Julia, please," Joy finally managed to speak up. "Let's just take a breath here." "I've taken plenty of breaths, Joy," Julia said without looking at her, her eyes still locked on Whoopi. "I've been patient and professional while this woman has done everything in her power to humiliate me. But I'm done being patient. I'm done being professional with someone who doesn't deserve either. You walk out of here and you'll regret it," Whoopi said, but her voice was shaky now. She was starting to realize the magnitude of what she'd done. "The only thing I regret," Julia said, slinging her purse over her shoulder, "is that it took me this long to stand up and leave. You should be ashamed of yourself, Whoopi. This behavior is beneath the person I thought you were." "I don't have to listen to this," Whoopi said weakly. "No, you don't," Julia agreed, "but everyone else listening will remember this. They'll remember how you treated a guest on your show. They'll remember the cruelty and the unprofessionalism, and they'll remember that when given the choice between taking the high road and going low, you chose to go as low as possible." Julia stepped back from the table and looked at the other hosts.